Good day coders, in this video we'll be creating this nice looking responsive site navigation. So you can just basically toggle this, open this, you can actually switch your actual routes in here and you'll see some changes actually happening, and all of this is going to be built using Angular. Now let's get to the actual code. Okay, let me first take you through everything you'll need to follow along with this video. So this project is basically running on Angular 20, and then we've also installed like Font Awesome for our icon, so you'd need to run this ng add command. And then we also have Tailwind CSS. So to set it up, you just need to install this Tailwind CSS and this post CSS. And then what you would then need to do is that in your root folder, you'd need to create this post CSS RC file, JSON, which basically has this JSON object. And then after that, in your styles.css, right, you'll just need to actually then import your actual Tailwind CSS. So in here you'll just import Tailwind CSS. Okay, that's basically all we need. And then after that, we'll actually then go ahead and actually create our theme, right? So with our themes, we just need two colors that we're going to be using. So which is the dark purple color and this light white color, and that's just basically it. Okay, so now what's the next step that we want to do, right? So what we'll do is actually come to our apps folder. So it's src apps, and then in our components folder, right, what we're gonna do is actually ng generate a component, and this component will be our side nav. So that's the component we're basically going to be creating. And then in here, if we go ahead in here, you'll actually see something is happening. Okay, so now let me just cd out to everything. Okay, awesome. Now I can just run this project. Okay, nope, sorry, my bad. Just can run this project already. Okay, interesting. So now that I've actually ran like the actual project, if I go ahead in here, let's see what I have. So basically nothing is showing in my actual project. So what I will just basically want to do is in this page right here, I'll just want to render my app.side nav. So I can just do this in Angular 20 just to see if it's actually gonna do something. So let's go ahead and see. Okay, yeah, interesting. So now that we actually see that our site nav is working, so we can go ahead and start with our actual UI over here. Right, so what's the first thing we'll need, right? So we'll just create a div in here, which is gonna be flex, right? And then we'll just use, let's see, so we'll just say flex, and then our width is going to be set up to 72. So that's our width, and then we'll just set up a background color to be the stock purple color. Okay, sorry, my bad. These needed to be dot. Okay, let me just go ahead and just do this. So we're gonna have a height which is gonna take up the full screen. Okay, now we see that we've got like something already showing for us, right? Okay, now that we have it actually showing, so in here we're gonna need a section for our logo. So we're gonna have section for our logo. So this is gonna be our logo. And then underneath our logo, we'll have our section for our, so these are nav items, right? So we're gonna have logo and nav items. Okay, so now what do we want to do, right? So in here, I'm just gonna have nav items. Let me just do that. Okay, so this is a flex, right? This is display flex, but I wanted to show in like a column. So we'll just say flex column, right? So that's gonna stack it properly. And then we wanna give it a proper padding. So my padding Y is gonna be set to 6, and then my padding X is gonna be set to 4. Okay, so that's gonna give it like some nice padding over there. And let's start off with like our actual logo section, right? So in my logo section, okay, I can just give it that for now, right? Although I'm just gonna remove this. Okay, so in my logo section, what I'm basically gonna do in here is I'm gonna set a height of 40 pixels, right? And then I'm gonna say this is a flex. Then I'm just gonna use items centering my items, and then I'm gonna use like column gap between my items, which is my my column gap is gonna be set up to be 2, and then margin bottom I'm just gonna use 10 pixels. Oh well, that's not 10 pixels, but I'm just gonna use 10. Okay, okay, that's fine for now. Right, so I'm using my actual font awesomes, right? So I want to use something like this. So I want to use my font awesome icon, right? But I see that I've actually got an error, right? And the reason for that error is because I need to first import my actual font awesomes modules, right? So I just need to say font awesome modules. So let's see, I've got my node modules in there. Then how do I do that? So let me just say import font awesome modules. This is font awesome. Yeah, so I've imported my actual font awesome modules, but what I'm basically gonna first need is my, in here, nope. Interesting. So let me just import this one. Okay, for now, I'm gonna need this, and that's coming in from there. And I'm gonna need a read only. That's gonna use that. Okay. Now that I actually have this guy over here, I'm basically then gonna actually render my icon. So what I need is icon in here. Then I'm gonna use this guy. I'm gonna also set up a size. So if I set up my size, I'm just gonna use an XL. And yeah, that's basically what I need. So let me just rerun this to see if everything still works. Okay, now if I re-render this, see what happens. So I see that I actually have that showing, but that's not the icon I want. So this is the icon I basically want to render. Okay, let me just use this guy. Okay, interesting. Okay, now that I've actually got that working, let me just put some bit of some styling into this icon, right? So now I'm just gonna use a class, and then I'm gonna have a background set up to amber 300, right? I want my width to fit this, and then my text. So this is my actual color, which is gonna use this dark purple color. and I'm gonna set the padding to be that. This guy is gonna be, so the border radius, what I want to do is I'm just gonna use this LG border radius, and that's just basically it. Sorry, that's auto. Okay, yeah, so this is basically what I'm gonna use for my actual, this is basically what I'm gonna use for that. Then in here I'm gonna have like a span. Okay, so I'm gonna have a span tag, then I'm gonna set the color to be white, set the fonts to the 2XL, and that's gonna be set up to be a bold. Okay, let me just use this as medium. Okay, sure, that's fair enough, that's good enough to have that. Okay, so now what's the next thing that I basically want to do is, so the next thing that I'll probably want to do is actually to set up my font icon again. So now with this font icon, I'm gonna use an FA, let me just say FA, and this is gonna be an arrow left. So I'm gonna use an arrow left. So this is gonna use an arrow left. Now let's do that. Okay, interesting. Okay, that's gonna say font, then that's the arrow left, and basically in there I'm just gonna use this as a large. Now let me go ahead and actually add some styling for this, right? So the styling for this is gonna be set here in my class. So I'm gonna say this is an absolute. This is absolute. I'm gonna give it like a color of my, well, text is gonna be a dark purple color. Right, so this is gonna be dark purple color. So I'm gonna say right equals to -4. Right, I'm gonna set my top to 8. Okay, and here, so that it doesn't flow out, I need to make this relative. So this is gonna be set up to be relative. So now let's go ahead and now set the height to be 32 pixels and the width to be 32 pixels. And then the background color will be set out to be a white color. So my background is going to be set to be white. Okay, so this is going to be flex, then it's going to be items, center, justify, content center. Let me just bring this to the next line so you can basically see it. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say round it, and then this is gonna be full, and then my border, color is gonna be this dark purple color. Okay, interesting. So now I've got something that's pretty much looking all good. Okay, so what's the next thing that I basically want to do? So the next thing is my actual items over here. Okay, so with my actual items, what I'm basically gonna do is, let me set up like a nav item, because I already have like nav items. So with my nav item in here, so with my nav items, I'm gonna say flex that. Okay, this is gonna be set up to flex column, and then my gap is gonna be set up to be 2. I think 2 is basically fine, my row gap. Okay, now let's go ahead and display something, right? So in here I'm gonna need, yeah, I'm just gonna use this and that. Okay, now let's go ahead and actually now style this. So this is gonna be flex. Okay, wait, this is flex, And then what I need is my items are going to be centered, my gap X, that's going to be 2, that's fine. Then we're going to say our padding, that's going to be my padding. And then we're going to have rounded large. Let's see. So when I hover into this item, I basically want to set the color to be that light white color that I set up, and then I want a cursor pointer. So let's basically see the stylings that we have. Yeah, so that styling did actually work quite amazing, so I like that. So this is gonna be base, right? So let's see. So the font is set up to be a medium font. Let's make this large. Let's see. Oh, sorry, my bad. Bold font. That font is bold, and then this one is set up to be a medium. Okay, so pretty much that's basically what we need, right? So if you now see, if I were to copy this guy over there and replicate it here, you'll see that I'll have like items, and if I actually now hover onto those items, I'll basically see something. Okay, but we want to also have a functionality so that we can actually collapse this, right? So if we collapse this, we want to make that actual width to be 20 pixels, right? Well, not 20 pixels, but the width is going to be set up to be 20. Okay, so how do we actually now sort that thing out, right? What we'll first need to do is to have a signal, and here is left nav open, right? This is going to be set up to be a signal, which is going to be right, the type of that is going to be a boolean, right? And it's going to be initially set up to true. Let me just make it truthy. Okay, awesome. So now what I basically want to do is to have it in such a way that, so just want to set up my classes. Okay, class, then this is going to be equal to, right, let me close this guy. And then what I basically want to do is have a width of 20, right? This width of 20 should be set up if the left navigation is closed. So if it's closed, so is left navigation is closed like this, right? Set that out. But I'm having like an issue. So if it's actually closed, it should be this W20, but if it's open, it should be this W72. But I'm getting an error. The reason why I'm getting an error is because I need to import over here my common modules, right? So if I import my common modules, then you'll see that this should work perfectly. Okay, so now if I were to change this to false, you'll see that it will actually collapse that, and if I change it back to true, it will actually open. But I want to actually control this using my UI. So what I will need to do is this icon over here, right, which is, so let me just send this here, so which is that. So if I set the click of that icon, so what I want to do is I want to set is left open, then I want to set and negate this is left open signal. So what this will basically do is if the is left is set up to be true, right, when I click on that button, it will just take the opposite of it, right? So it will set it to false. So if it's then false, if I click on it, it will set it to true. So that's basically what that will be actually doing. Okay, so now let me do this and let's see what's happening. Is this working? So let me just say localhost like that. So if I click this button, you'll see that something is actually happening, right? Okay, but we also want to, in here, so if I do this, so in here I also want to have a cursor pointer, right? So that when I hover on this, it actually has that cursor pointer. Okay, interesting. So that's basically all good, but we want to also do some sort of like an animation, right? So let me just send this to the bottom. So we also want to have like some sort of like an animation to the opening and closing of that side navigation. So this is just basically easy with Tailwind, right? So what we want to do is just add like a duration of 300, and that's basically it that we just basically need to do. So if I do this, you'll see now it has that nice animation for us. Okay, so now that's done, right? But we also want to have, so that when we close this arrow should point to the other direction, right? The opposite direction. And then if you close it again, it should actually revert back. So how you actually do this is you need to just set a rotation. So we're gonna have like a rotation over here. So we're gonna say rotate, right? So if I do this, sorry, my bad. So if I do this, I'm gonna rotate this 180 degrees, right? So if I rotate this 180 degrees, when it's closed, I wanna rotate it 180 degrees. Okay, let's do this. Right. Now let's save. Now you see that if I actually open this, you'll see it's actually changing. Okay, interesting. That's fine. Nice. Then we can go ahead and actually also use this duration thing. Shouldn't do much of a difference, because now if I do this, you'll see that something is actually happening. Okay, but we also want to add like some nice animation as well with this icon over here to just have that spinner. So what we'll do is add the same thing here. So in this logo icon, right? So we are basically gonna say we want to set the rotation to be 300 degrees. Okay, so what this will do is actually it will actually do something, but nothing is happening because we don't have any animation set up to it, right? So if I were to do this, come in here, the same icon, and add this animation, you'll see something is going to happen, right? The moment I actually click on this, you'll see that I've got that nice UI type of thing happening in there. Okay, I also want to set another one, right? I want to set an animation as well for this section over here, but because when I close this, right, I want to actually hide this section, right? But I want to do it so that it's actually animated really cool, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say a scale. So I'm going to have a scale set up to 0, and that's only if that is that. Okay. Now you see it's like it feels like it's actually now popping. Okay, that was just nice cool stuff to actually do. Okay, so now let's see what's happening. Okay, we also want to have these because hence you can see now what's happening right here is when I close this, I can still see these stuff, which I just basically don't want to see. Okay, so how do we now go ahead and actually solving that issue? So how we can actually solve this issue is if we come in here, then we just say ng class, right? We'll set this. Okay, so if we've closed, when we close our actual, because we only setting the align, we're only setting these align items to center. So when we close, let me see what I can actually do. Okay, so when we actually close this, we want to also justify so that this thing, okay, wait, before I actually do that, so that this actually makes sense, let me just not do this now for now. Okay, so what do I first want to do, right? So I want to have like a class in here, which is going to be set to hidden, but this is only hidden if my left navigation is not open, right? So this should then be set to be hidden, right? If I close this like that, do that as well, do that. Okay, so when I close this guy, right, I want those sections to be hidden, but you will see that I've got like some problem here with the icons. It's not basically like aligned in the center, right? And how I can go about fixing that is, so basically in here, if I set an ng class, right, and say justify content center, and this is only set up, right? So this should only be set up when is left navigation is not on, right? So now when I actually now hover onto this first one, you'll see that it's like centered in the middle, right? So what I can then go ahead and do is add this in here, right? Add that in there, and then that should fix that one, and then the next, the next, the next. But I'm basically not going to need these because I want to actually now dynamically render the stuff, right? So I can just remove all and then leave that one. Okay, so what do I want to do, right? So I want to have my nav items, right? So I'm going to have my nav items. So this is basically going to be my nav items, and in my nav items I want to have like what can I do? Okay, let me just do this here on the fly. Okay, I want to export an interface, or not there, let me just create here interfaces, right? And then in here, let me just have side nav dot interface dot ts. So that's the file I want. So and then I'm just gonna export interface and then side navigation items, right? So I'm gonna have an icon, which is gonna be a string. I'm gonna have a label. I'm gonna have a route. I'm gonna have is active. For now, okay, I can add that. Yeah, so basically this is basically what I'm gonna need for now, and my icons can just be set up to be type any. Then let's go ahead in this file over here, we can remove this because I've set up that. Then it's side nav item, which is an array. And then now if I do this, right, okay, you'll see that it's actually created some cool stuff for me, right? So let's see what I want. So I've got a dashboard, right? I've got my courses, right? I just also want, so I've got a dashboard, my courses. Okay, wait, let me leave these, right? Let me then create another one, icon, and then this dot fa. Let me just do this, fa user grad. Okay, then I'm gonna use fa user grad. Then I'm gonna have this as my profile. Nope, students. Yes, I'm gonna have these as my students. That okay. Interesting. Okay, for now that's fine. Let's now just go dynamically render these stuff, right? So I'm just gonna use this for, then I'm gonna say, let's see, I'm gonna use this for at 4, no, at 4 like that. Then I'm basically gonna use the nav items, right? Inside this guy over here, I'm just then gonna render these. Okay, I'm gonna render those. And then what I basically want to do is, so I'm gonna use items.label in here just to render the label. And then for my icon, I'm just gonna use that icon. And that's just basically it that I need. And then now if I go ahead, you'll see that I've got my actual dashboard. I've got my courses, and then I also have in here my students. Okay, awesome. So let me just basically use a proper icon for courses. So I'm just gonna use this icon for my courses. And I'm just gonna use this, open this guy over here for my courses. I'm gonna use that icon. Okay, interesting. So I've got these stuff over here which aren't really bad. I've got this which is like showing nice, right? And then maybe one thing I would want to do in here is to actually, when this thing is closed, right? So I want to set a margin right of like 2 only if the side is actually, because this was too close, right? So let me see, say -2. Let's see, yeah, because that was very close. So let me just do this 2 pixels because it was too close. Let's see how it looks like, right? It's not bad. Let me just say 4. Yeah, that's not bad at all, right? So now that will do that for me, right? If I hover on these items, you'll see that it's actually all proper. Yeah. You know what? I'm actually loving this. Right. Okay, I also want to have like a state so that if I click on this, it should actually activate that specific navigation, right? So handle active route. Okay. So what I will just basically do with that one is I'm gonna also use an index, right? So I'm gonna say index, which is just a number, and in here I'm just gonna say this dot navigations, right? Dot map. So I'm just gonna say dot map, right? Then I'm just gonna basically do that. Okay, yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So if the index is equal to that, I'm just gonna set that one to active and just the other ones to false, right? So now what I'm then gonna do is when I click on a specific item, so I'm just gonna add like a click event in here. So this is handle active, right? So this is just gonna say item and then index. Okay, and then in here I'm gonna use that is, I'm gonna have a light. Yes, I'm gonna have like that light color. Click, 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 and you'll see that when I click on this, right, you'll see that that is active now. And then even when I do that, you'll see that these stuff are actually active. So we basically done everything that we needed to do, but there's actually one thing that I didn't do, right? So in here, I'm just gonna have like a navigation. So I'm gonna have a nav, nope. So it's gonna be my main container, because what I basically want to do is have my site navigation rendering in here. So it's that. It's gonna be my site navigation, and then I'm gonna have my route container in here. Okay. Okay, interesting. All right, so this is gonna be then displayed flex. So this is gonna be flex, and then my height is gonna be set up to the screen's height, and then my width, let's see. So the height is gonna be set up to the screen's height. My width is gonna be full width, right? It's gonna use that full width. This one is gonna take up the rest of the space that's available, right? And then I can just give it like a blue background color so you can see what's actually happening, right? So if I say blue, then I say 700, you see what's basically happening. So if I now go ahead and actually view this, if I close this, you'll see it's still taking all that real estate. So that's where I'm gonna route my actual components. So I'm just gonna go ahead and create some pages. So I'm gonna have let's say courses. I'm gonna have courses, and then I'm gonna have courses and dashboard, right? Courses and dashboard. Okay, so in here I'm just gonna have courses.html. Then I'm gonna have courses.ts, and then I'm gonna have courses.scss. So that's basically what I'm gonna have. Then I can just copy these, paste them in here, and instead of courses, I can just copy this. Instead of courses, I'm gonna use dashboard. Okay, interesting. So now I can then go ahead and say have components. Okay. So in here I'm gonna have dashboard. Okay. Okay, now that's available for you. And then yeah. Okay. Interesting, right? So now that we actually have that in there, so now we can just say standalone. This is a standalone, sets to true. Okay, h1 tag dashboard. Then in here we're gonna have this set up to be courses. Right, that's fine. Add components. so in here I'm just gonna have courses component. Okay, so this is gonna be my courses component. Okay, interesting. Right, so in my routes, I'm just gonna have all of those routes. So in here I'm gonna have this path. Right, and then basically that. Okay, so I've actually now created all of my routes. Now I can just go ahead into my site navigations, open these. So I've got my dashboard, right? I've got my actual courses, right? Okay, I don't need these. I'm not gonna render these sub navigations, right? So I'm just gonna also use this as a dashboard because I don't have time to actually create the students. Yeah, okay. Now what will happen is, as I set this to active, I also want to have like a router. So I want to route to those pages. So I'm gonna have private router equals to that router. Okay, so now in here I'm just gonna have router dot navigate by URL, and then this is gonna be my item dot route. Yes, so this is basically what I'm gonna do. I don't know if it's gonna work for now. Okay, so if I do this, it's routing to those specific pages, hence you can see. So but now if I go to my actual, it's going to dashboard. Okay, I can actually add students. It shouldn't be as hectic, right? So I can just copy this, paste this, right, and just say students, right? And then I can just copy this, paste, 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 then just use this, and then this is gonna say students. Yeah, and that's basically what I need. And then I can just go ahead to my routes and create that students route. And then if I just say students, and then if I say students component, that should then be fine. Over there. So now if I go to my side navigation, let's go side navigation, where are you? Nope, it should be in components, side navigation. Instead of that, I'm just gonna route to students. Okay, so what's happening here, it's complaining that I've got students.scss. Okay, well, that's not there. Just needed to add this guy, and all should be well. So now if I click on students, okay, well, obviously here I'll need an h1 tag here which just says students, right? So this will basically say students. Okay, nope, not in there, but in my actual HTML. This will just basically say students. So if I click on this, save that. So now if I click on this, you'll actually see, right? So this is going to dashboard, this is going to courses, and that is going to my actual students. Okay, so what I can do is when I actually initialize this, I want to set this guy to be truthy. Okay, let's see what happens. So this is going to go to dashboard, courses, students. And then now I can go ahead to my actual apps, remove this guy here, and open this in full. Right, so this is basically what I was doing. So if I click here, you'll see that it's actually navigating, and we also have this nice looking UI. So yeah, this is basically what we were creating for this video. If you like this content, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.